Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in this video we're going to go over the stuff which was shown on the sneak peek which has to do with airplanes or aircraft, since we're going to be looking at some helicopter stuff too. The first thing I do want to clarify though is in the last video that I did, I talked about the new light cruiser from the Germans and said it was in the same class as the Kern. It is in a very similar class to the Kern, but it is not exactly the same. So I apologize for that. Hopefully this clarifies the issue I suppose I caused. So let's get into the planes that were on offer. Unfortunately there was more stuff about the ground vehicles than the aircraft, but I feel like that's because they had some new systems. You know, the radar system mainly affects ground. It also, they had the new variable armor mechanic, well not mechanic but basically viewer, which is going to be very important to the game alongside the equations that they just added to work out penetration. But one thing that we did see on the trip there was the Mitsubishi T2. Now, the Mitsubishi T2 might be the most beautiful plane that has ever been added to War Thunder. This machine looks absolutely beautiful. It looks incredibly modern, incredibly sleek. It has two engines in it. It has a lot of power behind it, and it also has a lot of weapons on it as well. But we'll go through them, but the main thing to understand is this is going to be the Supersonic jet for the Japanese, and it is definitely a step above as long as they make it historically accurate, and this is where it gets interesting. So the first thing is people will bring up the fact that this was used into the 2000s. How the hell can we have a jet which was used all the way into the 2000s? Well, it's because it's a training aircraft. It was never really designed for frontline service, and therefore it makes sense to use these for, you know, decades after they would be surplus to requirement when it comes to frontline service. So yeah, these have been used for absolutely years, but understand that it is in a training capacity. Now, let's talk about the weaponry. So the first thing to understand is it has a 20mm rotary cannon in the front of it, very similar to what you see from the F2 Sabre, but it only has one single one with 750 rounds. It also can be equipped with AIM-9E Sidewinders, air-to-air missiles, so very similar to the American ones, and if we have a look here, we can actually see the AIM-9E, but we'll just talk about this first. So another thing to note is if you look at the stat card, this stat card is for simulator battles. Also remember that because this is a test server, generally the stat cards completely lie to your face, so we can't really take that into account. What we can kind of take into account is a battle rating at 10-0, makes complete sense, but one thing I've talked about a lot with jets is once we start getting into the areas where we're at, so the F-100, the Mitsubishi T2, you know, the MiG-19, we start ramping up quite aggressively for certain nations. You know, even if you compare the F-100 to the Starfighter, you know, the Starfighter is pretty much double the speed of the F-100, and that is, you know, a leap when it comes to, well, technology. If we have a look at the aircraft for the British, they have a lot of just less than Mach 1 aircraft, and then it goes boom straight up to the Lightning F2, which is or Lightning F3, which is Mach 2. So you have this huge gap for a lot of nations, and the Mitsubishi T2 is kind of like that as well. This thing can go 1700 kilometers an hour. 1700. There is nothing in the game right now. There is nothing that is even coming to the game that we've seen can get anywhere near that speed. We're talking about 400 to 500 kilometers an hour off that speed. So if this thing comes in with a crazy max speed like that, I don't understand how anything touches it. You know, especially with the way that it's designed to also be maneuverable, to also be designed for speed. This is just insane. I don't understand how stuff competes with it. And I think we might have another Type 90 situation, where the Type 90 is one of the best tanks in game, maybe even the best. But because you don't have a ton of people playing it all the time, its true nature never really comes out. And maybe the T2 will be the same, because of the fact that it's in, the Japanese tree. The F40 was definitely, when it was added to the Japanese tree, was probably the second best saber, maybe even the best saber in the game, but still, it could not hold a candle to the Canadair because of the popularity of the German tree and the American tree over the Japanese. So we'll have to see if the T2 really brings a ton of people to the to the Japanese tree. I'm certainly going to try and grind it out. It looks a hell of a lot of fun. It should have a ton of acceleration, a ton of burst mass when it comes to all the stuff it can carry, so hopefully we'll see it in the game. The only thing I hope they don't do is artificially nerf the damn thing. And this is a point, I've talked about before. As I said, the problem with scaling up and up and up with these jets, if you start artificially nerfing them to fit, with the current meta or fit with what speeds we already have, then you're not really flying that plane anymore. You're just playing top tier tanks where everything is made up. It doesn't feel, at least to me, it doesn't feel real. One of the big reasons I play War Thunder is for its realism angle, and if you artificially nerf or artificially buff a flight model of an aircraft that we do know full information on, it doesn't feel good, right? And it actually vehemently pushes me away from wanting to use this plane. Just like with top tier tanks with their classified nature, I am pushed away from that discussion already because of that fact. The next one is the AIM-9E Sidewinders. So this is the AIM-9E. This is going to be an upgrade for the F100 and also are present on the Mitsubishi T2. So you can see the Mitsubishi T2 gets 2 of them on each side of the wing, and for the F100 it gets 4 of them. And the big difference between the Bs and the Es is that these can overload 10 Gs. So technically they should be a lot more maneuverable in the air. They should be able to be much better at tracking their targets through the air. They also said on the stream that there will be a Russian equivalent to this missile, so therefore the Soviets will be able to get a similar missile, which I'm sure will have similar characteristics. The next machine to look at is this. So this is the M.D.460. The M.D.460 is at battle rating 9.0, at least on this test server. What is interesting, though, is that it is supposedly, according to the stream, a supersonic aircraft. Now, my feeling is that this is one of those ones where it's close to supersonic, and it's not, as crazy as some of the other ones that we've just seen, such as the T2. Because when I've tried to have a look for this thing, there is stuff that comes up, but it doesn't really talk a lot about its supersonic nature. What we can talk about, though, is the fact that it does get access to AIM-9B Sidewinders, and something they talked a lot about in the stream was that, just like they said in just after update 1.85, Sidewinders or air-to-air missiles are going to be slowly added to a lot of aircraft which before didn't have them, but could use them. So I'm sure this update we're going to get an explosion of air-to-air missiles on a lot of stuff. So with this, this machine has 2 30mm DEFAs in the nose, very similar to a lot of French machines we already have. It's going to be battle rating 9.0 and also rank 6. So it looks like all of the rank 6 machines are going to be in that 9.0 to 10.0 period, which, would make sense if you're trying to make rank 6 a full-fledged thing. But yeah, this jet should be supersonic. I'm definitely looking forward to use it on the dev server because I want to test that claim. Because I definitely feel like it's going to be one of those which is on the barrier instead of one of those which is going to fly past it. Otherwise, it would just be straight at 10.0 instead of this 9.0. The other thing is it actually has retractable armament, which I'm guessing is designed to actually reduce drag on the aircraft. So you can see that it has some rockets here, and the way that it works is kind of like with a bomb bay door, where you have to, in realistic and also arcade technically, you have to open the bomb bay door before you drop the bombs. Well, this works in a similar system where you have to, let the rack down before you can fire the missiles, rockets, which sounds really cool. Now, Sean actually asked BVVD here if they would snap off if you went too fast, and BVVD said no, that isn't the case. So they should, my guess is, affect performance if they're out. We'll have to see if it increases drag on the aircraft, but generally it is kind of cool that now we have, in a way, inbuilt rockets to certain machines, and I'm sure with the MD this will be kind of like one of those things where you attempt it with this, see if it works properly, and then once you've worked out it fully works properly, then you add it to other machines, just like a lot of the mechanics that we're seeing. The next one is this thing. Now, this beautiful machine is the H-34, and it's actually a American helicopter, a utility helicopter, which was used by France and also America. And one of the interesting things about it is, of course, its ugly duckling design. And the reason why it's designed like this is because this is where the engine is. The engine actually feeds through the cockpit in a way, past the pilots. So it's just, compared to a lot of the other ones where we see the engines behind the pilots or up here somewhere, it is very interesting that we have the growth on the front where the engine actually is. Very similar to the reserve, but the machine that the Soviets have that you start out with. Now, what was interesting to me was that this machine had everything when it came to armament. One of the problems I think some of the helicopters have, it's actually been getting better over time, but this is exemplified with some of the late tier German helicopters, where you can only really take one armament, so you don't have a lot of versatility if you enter a battlefield, and let's say you've only taken 80 gems, and then, oh god, there's a plane coming at me, you have issues there. Where with this, and a lot of the other French helicopters, what has been emphasized is the idea of being able to take a lot of different armaments at the same time. So you can see, even just from looking up here, this thing has access to 2 AGM-22 missiles. It also has access to 4 Browning machine guns. You can actually see the holes for the guns here, 2 on either side, and then also HVARs as well, which are on the side of this machine on the left, so in a vertical fashion. So to me, that sounds awesome. The issue, of course, for this helicopter is it's going to be incredibly slow and not very maneuverable, but when it comes from the armament point of view, that to me sounds good, especially if that is a stock set of stuff. And of course, being at rank 5 battle rating 9.0, I wish that helicopters like this were maybe a little bit lower in battle rating, but I understand why they're not, and hopefully this will be a good aircraft a good helicopter to start with in grinding out the helicopter tree. We already know that they're adding in 2 of the actual fun aircraft, the very fast and very maneuverable helicopters on top of this, and then, well, we're looking at maybe 2 more or 3 more that's going to come to the tree. So we've got the 2 Gazelles, we've got this American-made, French-used H-34. Let's speculate about the other 2 or 3. My guess is a bunch of Alouettes. Anyway, on to the next thing. Of course, the Votor 2A IDF, what we talked about in another video that we did earlier. The Votor is getting a Israeli skin and is going to be a French premium. It's a rank 5, battle rating 9.0 vehicle, and it's going to have air-to-air missiles. So it has 4 Shafir air-to-air missiles, and also the 4 30mm DEFA cannons that you'll be used to. Now, obviously, the Votor is an incredibly powerful plane when you let it be. It's also just kind of a very much turn your brain off plane and just kind of drop bombs and have a bit of fun, maybe catch people who are on a late spawn. This definitely gives it a different outlook because of its plane killing capabilities have been increased a lot, and also you're going to have to decide, do I want to take air-to-airs, do I want to take a bunch of bombs, maybe a bunch of rockets, and also, is this thing going to get an air spawn? because now it has much more emphasized plane killing capabilities. The Airspawn will make it incredibly good at starting fights, which is something obviously it would struggle with because of its maneuverability. So we'll have to see. I'm generally looking forward to it. Hopefully it does pretty well. The next one is just a naval thing. I wanted to talk about this because I thought it was a really cool little... It's like one of those really nice little additions, like a quality of life improvements in the game, and a lot of these go overlooked, so I like talking about them to make sure that people know about them. So, in Naval, they've actually added in a timer now. You can see the shell splashes in 4, and this means shell splashes in 4 seconds. So, if you're in Realistic, as you can see, and I'm guessing it works in Arcade too, basically, once you shoot, it puts up a timer which will tell you when your shells hit where they're actually supposed to go. So, the reason why this is nice, and the reason why this is good, is because you can now tell which ones are your shells, especially in Realistic, when they hit. Because if you have one target in the distance, and everybody is firing at it, it can sometimes be really hard to work out, where your shells are landing, and correct as you should. So, for me, it's just a nice little quality of life thing. People probably won't notice it and won't care, but for the people who really are precise with their aiming and want to get better at it, this is a perfect system for them. The other thing is also helicopter cockpits. Now, on the stream, they showed the H-35, which is, this one we talked... Sorry, the H-34. I'm gonna keep getting that wrong. The H-34, they showed the cockpits, which looked really nice, and they also showed a cockpit of an Mi-24. So for me, this cockpit looks beautiful. Before we only had placeholder cockpits, and the only thing that didn't really look very nice in this was there was a fan up here, and the fan looked a little bit, let's say, pixely, but everything else, it looks absolutely stunning. So, just like with other plane cockpits, we are getting helicopter cockpits as well. It would be lovely, of course, to eventually get full HD bomber cockpits, but if we get, full HD helicopter cockpits, that's also awesome. Maybe there'll be a bunch of people who'll be interested in helicopters because of the cockpits. I personally really like what they look like, and I hope that it gets expanded upon. Instead of just doing a few machines, eventually all of them get it. And also on top of this, there aren't a ton of helicopters, so I'm guessing making the HD cockpits would not be too hard to do, especially since a lot of the helicopters are very similar to each other, such as a ton of Mi-24s, a ton of AH-1s, a bunch of BOs. There is stuff there which, you could kind of just copy and paste and then kind of trim to the other helicopters. So yeah, I'm happy they showed this. It was nice to see at the end of the day. Now, the last two things, I want to show some two clips. So the first one is the radar-guided AA. The radar, when it comes from a plane perspective. So this is the Javelin that they used to actually talk about the guided AA, and you can see how the system is working. So you've got the part on the left there, which shows the dot on the map where the enemy is. Then you've got a square around it, which shows that it's being tracked on the map. And then on the actual hub screen, you have a compass, which is showing you a triangle, which will give you the bearing of the machine that you're fighting. On top of this, if we actually go back, I will just redo. It also tells you the distance of how far the enemy is away. It tells you the velocity, the difference in velocity between you and the enemy. So it'll actually tell you if they're actually going away from you or if they're coming closer to you. And it's very simple to understand. Like, to me, this looks like an amazing system. The only problem I am worried about is with a system like this, how far is its expansion? What I mean by that is how far... 20 kilometers it says, which is, if that is the same for some of the World War II stuff which is getting it, such as the Do-217s, well, it'll be very easy to tell where people are on the map incredibly quickly. And this is obviously going to be a little bit of an issue, because if I have a 4-man squad and I'm running, let's say, a Do-217 or a P-61, I can tell my squad exactly where all of these lads are. right? And I can do that very, very quickly, which is a bit of a problem. On top of this, it was also noted that you can actually turn off radar when it comes to the ground vehicles. I'm not sure if they talked about it with the air vehicles, but with the ground vehicles, if you have it on and you have certain machines in the air which have radar, they can detect you on the ground because you have the signature going off. And I thought that was a nice little touch, and hopefully that is kind of expanded upon in the future. We do have the preliminary list of vehicles which will have radar. I will make sure to go over the devlog at some point, probably later on, but I just thought it was really interesting how it all came to pass, like when they were talking about it. And it now makes sense why you can turn off radar. So this is the Tunguska, and I just wanted to show this at the end because I didn't show it in the last video. The Tunguska has obviously the 430mm, and it also has the missiles. So this is pretty much showing how they work. You have the distance, the difference in velocity. Then, of course, you have the the guided missile, which is going into attack. So the system on the ground is very similar to how it works in the air. The only difference is you can see on the left-hand side, you have a 0, 90 degree, 180 to 360, showing your bearing compared to the compass at the top. And the solid line is where you are looking, whereas the line which is just going around is basically, you know, kind of scanning the area, I suppose, or giving a representation of that. And also, something that I didn't talk about when it came to the radar, and I'm kind of saving this to talk about in the devlog, but I'll talk about it here. There are dead spots for this radar. So I know probably a lot of you are looking at this thinking, oh god, how am I going to get close to the battlefield? The radar has dead spots above it. Massive dead spots. So basically, if you come in from a high angle above, you know, the radar guided AA, especially if you have a machine which can actually see them with your radar, then you could take them out very, very easily. And we haven't actually seen if any helicopters are going to have radar yet, which is something we'll have to see going forward. If they don't, or sorry, if they do, then I can see a lot of AA getting absolutely annihilated. Also the lock-on system and the target tracking making a lot of stuff automatic. I personally would prefer stuff not to be as automatic as this. I feel it takes a lot of skill away from the player and just turns it more of an automated system. But yeah, that's obviously another topic for another time. Anyway, so the main thing to think about is the Mitsubishi T2. This is the thing to at least see if it has a counter in the upcoming updates. My opinion is probably not. And I'm really interested to see what speed they put it at, because if they do it realistically, there ain't gonna be anything that'll even touch this damn thing when it comes to speed. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.